Back in my halcyon days as an art student, full of the promise of art's power to change the world, I had a fellow artist friend who happened to be a staunch feminist. Inevitably, her views on male misogyny and the perceived patriarchal underpinnings of modern society directly influenced her work, culminating in a series of paintings that explored the symbolic significance of the phallus and its resulting effect upon the subjugation of women. Or, to put it another way, my friend hated dick with a passion. However, these paintings were not, as you might reasonably have expected, depictions of male genitalia, but rather man-made objects that resembled erect penises. Before long, I realised she had a fairly robust distaste for any number of objects that I'd hitherto considered completely harmless. Lollipops, lighthouses, sausages, candles, you name it. If it looked like a big old cock, it was on her list of things to paint. What the fuck? For her, these otherwise benign objects held a talismanic power to perpetuate a male-dominated world. As little as I cared for her absurd theories, I did have a measure of sympathy for her predicament. To feel as though the world was filled with the very object you despised must have been a hellish existence indeed. Even so, I tried to offer my own perspective on the matter. Take the space rocket, for instance, I said, falling back upon an area of penis-shaped objects I had some familiarity with. That was the shape it was due to aerodynamics. The slender shape minimises drag from the atmosphere. The fact that it therefore resembles a phallus is purely coincidental. My friend patiently shook her head and with a knowing smile offered her response. No, John. Some man just wanted his cock in space. Years later, when I began collecting vintage science fiction books in earnest, my friend's theories came back to haunt me. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but before long I could no longer deny what I was seeing. As I cast my gaze across these beautifully painted covers, I saw something suspicious about the technical marvels blasting their way across the page. Many of them had more than a passing resemblance to big old schlongs. I'm sure I'm not alone in confessing that I have, on occasion, drawn a penis and left it for a friend to find. I suppose it might be considered a gift of sorts, a cheap frill. Sometimes it's hidden within a birthday or Christmas card. Other times it might be playfully daubed across a misted window pane. More recently, I've branched out into arranging the crumbs on the chopping board to render my various members for my partner's appreciation. One curving line followed by 2 circles, and you have successfully transcribed a crude representation of the male sex organ. It is the perfect economy of action to reaction, a practice that has been going on for time immemorial. If you've ever watched any of the coverage of the Tour de France, you'll know what I'm talking about. For me, this preoccupation began as a teenager. Me and a friend had an exciting hobby whereby we would draw penises using the rudimentary paint programs of the early 1990s. With said drawing complete, we'd turn off the monitor and leave our artistic works for the appreciation of the next unsuspecting user. This was always a hilarious way to spend the last 5 minutes of the lesson, until the day our teacher happened to be standing quietly behind us. Hey! That's a big todger! His baritone voice descended upon us like a heavy penis dropped from the heavens. At last he had caught the serial cock artists in the act. Many years later, I began to wonder if perhaps these artists of the 1960s, 70s and 80s were perhaps playing similar japes. Or was it rather a purely subconscious act, the artist's penis somehow dictating the composition towards its likeness? However, there was also that slightly more egregious possibility of which my old friend would have been a firm proponent. Could this have been a purposeful attempt to assert male dominance within the already male-dominated genre of science fiction? What now follows are 12 slides that I will use to explore these various possibilities further. This collection, might I add, is merely the tip of a considerably large penis-shaped iceberg. If you happen to know of any other worthy contenders, please do let me know. We shall begin our adventures with an early cover from Frank Herbert's Dune, painted in the late 1970s by the artist Bruce Pennington. Pennington. The front cover is innocuous enough, but it's only when we turn to the rear of the gatefold that something appears somewhat off-kilter. There have been many iterations of this piece of fictitious machinery in the past. The spice harvester that sifts the sands of Dune for that most precious of interstellar commodities. However, I doubt any of them have ever looked quite so much like a penis. Furthermore, it doesn't take a giant leap of the imagination to substitute the caterpillar tracks for testicles. The only thing that appears to be missing is a jet of discarded sand spouting from the tip. It may not surprise you to know that the Dune novels provide a dearth of images that could easily be mistaken for penises. The giant sandworms of Dune are understandably a big selling point for the series, and have often appeared centre stage upon its various covers. Take this edition of Heretics of Dune from 1986, for instance, displaying a resplendent example of a giant penis. Sandworm. A penis at rest, one might say, though with a mouth that suggests its hunger has not quite been sufficiently sated. And of course we cannot overlook this 1983 edition of God Emperor of Dune, where the son of Paul Atreides, Leto II, has become a hybrid of human and sandworm. This makes for an arresting, if not disturbing, image. The human face protruding from the phallic tip like a ready-made human birthed from an impossibly massive cock. Obviously, worms of any description will be low-hanging fruit in our explorations, so let us venture a little deeper into space and see what we might find. For this next section, I've selected a few covers where the artist has undoubtedly been influenced by the prevailing design of contemporary rockets. Like the sandworm, the rocket is readily transposed into the realm of cockery. For our first example, we have a design painted by Peter Tybus for Fred and Geoffrey Hoyle's Into Deepest Space. Tybus's distinctive airbrush style has here been put into service upon a particularly juicy rocket ship. The lurid pink tones of the central shaft, the jaunty, one might say expectant tip, to my mind builds a fairly robust case for penis provenance. With the thruster holes empty of propelling fire, its object quality is further enhanced. It becomes a saucy plaything, a randy, sugar-coated fuckstick. Likewise, Dean Ellis's painting for the 1978 edition of Lester Del Rey's Mysterious Planet has a forthright turgidity that willfully points its tip at the observer. At first, we glance to the draped tarpaulin and breathe a sigh of relief, momentarily satisfied that the shaft is all but an empty shell. However, the rocket's helmet is of such brutal solidity, such juicy engorgement, that we cannot help but stifle a gasp. What's more, the frozen wave to the right of the quivering member seems to function as a frigid receptacle for the rocket's avert advances. One cannot help but think that the frozen tundra is only moments away from being rogered into oblivion. The next example likewise adheres to the rocket blueprint, despite the fact that it is festooned with finials and ribs. It might otherwise have escaped our scrutiny as a flying space penis, were it not for the brazen use of fleshy tones employed to render it. The pronounced space helmet completes the association, and we are left wondering, if all the extraneous additions were removed, would we be left with a representation of the artist's penis? For our final rocket-inspired spaceship, we turn our gaze to the dubiously titled Tin Woodman by David Biscoff and Dennis Bailey. For me, it seems a stretch of the imagination to consider this spaceship to be the culmination of coincidence alone. I can only speculate that the artist was attempting to impart both tin and wood to this spacefaring vehicle, but what we are left with appears to be a raging boner encased within an unforgiving sleeve of steel. Only the two unfortunate testicles are observable, being squeezed to within an inch of their lives. But of course, to be fair, the phallic spaceships we have just perused could just as easily be blamed upon the blueprint of the traditional rocket. Therefore, let us now turn our attention to an artist famous for shirking such rudimentary conformist tropes. Over the course of his career, The British artist Chris Foss illustrated more than 1,000 science fiction book covers. Foss famously never read the books he was asked to illustrate and was given full rein to do as he pleased. This incredible freedom undoubtedly contributed to the diverse range of spaceship designs he created over the course of his career. Occasionally, the odd phallic ship might rear its ugly head, but by and large he managed to dodge that unseemly bullet admirably. However, even the mighty Foss had to succumb to temptation eventually, and it is here, upon the cover of Isaac Asimov's The Naked Sun, that he finally debases himself. At first glance, nothing appears amiss. The spaceship in question could hardly be mistaken for a penis in its own right. It is only when juxtaposed with the monumental robot behind it that it takes on a more sinister aspect. Like some preening male stud, the robot appears to be proudly displaying its circuit-encrusted popsicle to the universe. The only saving grace is the occluding presence of the spaceship, but alas, this is a fruitless attempt to preserve the robot's modesty, for the ship itself has become a de facto dick. The last spaceship we shall scrutinise dominates the gatefold cover of Fred Gambino's Ground Zero. Were we to only view the front cover, all would be well. However, unfold the cover in all its glory, and it is difficult not to observe the monumental penis waiting to smack you in the chops. For the last few examples, let us move on to the array of fantastical creatures that so often vie for position amidst the luring gleam of metallic starships. Here the possible influence of aerodynamic cockery is absent. The artist is left to sift the recesses of their mind to conjure creatures that have never before given breath. One would imagine the influence of the penis would be all but absent, but you would be wrong. And so it is that we find this mounted beast, painted by Alan Craddock for Monica Hughes' 1985 novel Sandwriter. At first glance, all appears well. After all, what could go wrong with a beast of burden, ridden by a beautiful mummified temptress? It is only when we focus upon the veiny shaft of the creature's neck, however, that the first beads of sweat alight upon our brow. The cleft between the creature's straining shoulders, coupled with the blunt head mounted upon the turgid shaft, brings to mind a very different beast altogether. Indeed, she appears to be riding a particularly large and throbbing chopper. For our penultimate study, we turn to the Spanish-language comic magazine Zona 84 from the summer of 1985. Initially, I was only impressed by the wonderful rendering of these two creatures, certainly in large part influenced by dinosaurs. Perhaps, shall we say, the Diplodocus? However, it was only as my eye climbed the alarmingly veiny neck to the seat of the creature's intelligence that my assumptions began to crumble. Were there an art competition to render as accurately as possible the tip of a penis, then this creature's head would have won a gold medal for its verisimilitude. The addition of some needle-like teeth within the urethral opening is as feeble an attempt at subterfuge as sprinkling a pinch of glitter on a turd and calling it a gemstone. To make matters worse, said mouth appears to be spitting forth a rather unseemly liquid, completing the depiction of a penis within the final throes of ejaculation. However, even this pales into insignificance when measured next to our final example. If you have children with you, or adults of a delicate disposition, I would advise you take appropriate action, for what we are about to witness is as close to pornography of the penis as you are likely to get upon the cover of a science fiction novel. The late Josh Kirby was famous for his illustrations of the Discworld novels. His unique and recognisable style was put through its paces to render the beautiful fantasy settings of Terry Pratchett's formidable imagination. These covers were redolent with fleshy characters that positively exuded personality and comic charm. Lasciviousness is occasionally suggested, but it's always rendered with a deft touch, a mere glimpse of possible naughtiness that might be featured within. However, in those dark ages before Pratchett's Discworld novels were penned, Kirby seems to have turned his formidable talents to the realization of monsters that would make Stephen King lose temporary control of his bladder. Stress Pattern by Neil Barrett Jr., published in 1974, is a science fiction story that features a unique form of travel within the digestive tract of a huge earthworm. Yes, indeed, dear friends, we have come full circle. As we have previously observed, the worm, like the space rocket, is easily mistaken for a winkle. However, if that great muscular pillar of quivering flesh is an earthworm, I'm a monkey's uncle. Let us call a spade here and proclaim this monstrosity for what it is. An absolutely humongous cock. What is more, as though to confirm the impostor it is, the hapless aliens standing within the shadow of this pulsating column all appear to be in a state of advanced pregnancy. A sinister possibility arises into the imagination that this particular race of aliens are propagated by a planet-spanning seed cannon. And here, for now, I will leave you to ponder what you have witnessed. What are your own thoughts upon the matter? Are these purposeful penis imposters, or are they subconscious cock interlopers? Or, as I'm increasingly beginning to wonder, am I seeing penises where there are none to be found? Please do comment down below and let the discussion begin. Cheers for watching and cheerio! This makes for an arresting, if not disturbing, image. The human face protruding from the phallic tip like a ready-made human squeezed for an impossibly massive cock. Obviously, the human face protruding from the phallic tip like a ready-made human birthed from an impossibly massive cock. Obvious. But what we are left with appears to be a raging... However... But what we are left with appears to be a raging boner. But what we are left with appears to be a raging boner. In case... But what we are left with appears to be a raging boner, encased within an... Can't fuck it. A sinister possibility rises into the imagination that this particular race of aliens are propagated by a planet-spanning seed cannon.